Well, I'm gonna, with your permission, call this blood libel, because I think that it is just one example of vicious blood libel that has actually systematically been spread, not just since 10/7, but certainly on 10/7 and since 10/7, the worst attack of Jews since the Holocaust, that is actually fueled and enabled after being peddled on Al Jazeera and, as you said, other traditional media outlets that quote, let's be very perfectly honest, Hamas, a designated terror organization with genocidal intent to annihilate the state of Israel and murder Jews. And so in that sense, this is one example of the preposterous blood libel, which then fuels the false moral equivalence, not just on traditional media, not just on social media, but actually then peddled by politicians, by decision makers, by legislators around the world, and in fact continues to resonate. And even the denial of that blood libel that was spread, you know, and Hamas itself disavowed the blood libel that was spread for all kinds of reasons. It was actually disavowed only for their own reasons, but it was disavowed by peddling yet another blood libel, and that is to the identity of those that have been killed by Hamas. And we have to be very clear. Hamas is a genocidal terror organization for whom human tragedy is a strategy. And anybody that participates in that strategy, advancing it, peddling it in social media and traditional media, or in any other medium, is actually enabling genocidal terror. And of course, it's supporting authoritarian regimes.
Now, you just mentioned this, but beyond just public anger with Israel that generates from these types of stories, we're seeing the rhetoric actually echo in official meetings as well. Just yesterday, IDF Brigadier General in the reserve, Zamira Avivi, took to the media to share a story about when he met with the holder of the Israeli-Palestinian portfolio at the U.S. State Department. She actually accused Israel of systematically sexually abusing Palestinian women. And he says that he was shocked in that meeting. He asked her if it makes sense that this phenomenon would exist and the media would never have reported on it. So I'm interested to hear your take on how misinformation is informing official meetings more particularly.
So we are actually in the midst of what I would call an unconventional war for public opinion that has been raging for decades to demonize and delegitimize and apply double standards to the state of Israel, the proverbial Jew among the nations. And everything that we have discussed are just examples or manifestations of that war. We have to be very clear. It is a war front, and it is raging, and it is informed by misinformation or disinformation, whether intentional or unintentional, actually peddled in a social media age and making its way around the world much faster than the truth can ever strap its boots on, if you will. But it is, and let's be very honest, intentional. The fact that those peddling that misinformation and disinformation know that they can rely on those that will continue to perpetrate and perpetuate those informations as that kind of data is actually what fuels terror. As I said, genocidal terror, including those designated terror organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, and of course, they're supporting authoritarian regimes. We should not be surprised, because that is precisely the strategy that they are using in order to undermine democracies, in order to use those principles, the shared foundational principles of democracies like free speech, and actually collapse them and threaten them. And you mentioned before, this did not begin yesterday. The international institutions themselves have partaken in the systematic demonization and delegitimization and the application of double standards to the state of Israel, whether it's the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, whether it's UNRWA and other organizations that have actually systematically enabled this moment or existential moment that we have arrived at. And in that sense, it is critical that all democracies understand that co-opting and weaponizing these international mechanisms, these principles that were created so that never again, not just to Jews and not just to the Jewish nation state, but in fact, that threaten democracies around the world with that kind of disinformation, we're at that critical moment.